Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of LSM's Corner. Today is May 23rd. I had to re-record this video. I recorded it last night, but it turns out there was an issue with my recording program and my mic audio had not been recording the entire time. So I have to re-record today. Um, for starters, I'll give you guys an update on the status of my hands. My hands were doing better last week, which after I'd actually been sick with a mild fever um, for a few days. And my hands have been feeling better because I've been actually doing nothing with them all day. Like I'd just been since I had a fever and I was like feeling really bad. I was just like in bed, sort of like watching Netflix, maybe on my phone. And so especially my right hand started feeling quite better. But then later in the week, I started using it, not a lot, maybe like 20, 30 minutes a day. But that still seems to be enough to where it started feeling bad again. So I'm going back to the complete rest and non-use of my right hand for anything computer related. I'm typing with it. I'm not using the mouse. Whatever usage I do use, I use my left hand because the symptoms of my left hand have not been anywhere near as bad. So I do light usage of my left hand, no usage of my right hand. And hopefully this will get my symptoms down faster so that I can start doing stretching and exercises, which once I get into those, they'll strengthen my wrist and enable it to be able to work again. Update forecast, update 2.6.8 is planned for this week. Probably going to be late this week, maybe Friday. And we'll include a few things. Let me double check really quickly what we already have in it. Okay, so we're fixing some pretty important bugs. Some of which I don't want to say right now because they could potentially be abusable. We're also giving some options like the ability to display all your characters on your profile. Um, and then a few other things. I'm looking to add the sword tokens in this update to where you'll be able to earn sword tokens even if you don't have a custom sword, so that you'll be able to get a custom sword. And there's a bunch of other things. Since the state of what exactly is going to be this update is still a little bit in flux. I don't want to say more. The other thing I can say is that we're looking to add the option to have a custom Bankai name. So instead of just saying it, you release Bankai or release Resurrección Segunda Etapa, you'd be able to actually give it a name. So for instance, in the series, Ichigo's Shikai was named Zangetsu, and his Bankai was named Tensa Zangetsu. So you'd be able to have a name like Tensa Zangetsu for your Bankai or your Segunda Etapa. And then we've got probably 20 other things um, on the list. Oh, maybe about 30. And hopefully we'll be able to get like half of those, maybe more than half of those done. So it's kind of hard to say exactly which things are going to get done right now. Other than that, so that again should be coming about the 25th or 26th. Hitori's been doing the vast majority of the work on that, as well as also I've been doing supports with him every few days or every week. Um, we meet up and we have a Skype call, and he is basically my hands on the supports. So I think that mostly wraps it up for the intro. I guess I'll also give an update status on event. Still tentatively planning event to start the first week of June. Well, I guess the first week of June ends up ending pretty late. I'd like to get it started the weekend of like June 2nd, if possible. So we're going to be heavily targeting that. If not, we'll start it probably the week after. But I'm going to try to get it done by June 2nd. And then we're going to have, let's see, tournament registration should open around June 15th or so. Basically, around the middle of June, we'll open the tournament registration. And that'll be open for like 2 weeks, and then the tournament should start July 1st. We'll be revealing full details on all the specifics, divisions, prizes, etc. Revealing all that when we open tournament registration in the middle of June. So look for it then. And then the tournament, just a couple details to confirm. There will be multi-PvP divisions as well as 1v1 divisions. So there will be a 3v3 and a 1v1 division for each rank. That's we're doing ranks 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. There's a question about that later as well. Okay, moving on. First section looks like update questions. First question, maybe for summons you could put in a personal sidekick or something for the player. Would that be feasible? Technically, it would be a significant amount of work, but it would be feasible. Um, it's just a matter of putting it, finding a way to make it make sense. And with everything else going on with battles right now, I think I'd rather balance the system around the options that are already in it before adding such a dramatic new option like that. However, it is certainly something that I'm probably going to explore later on, maybe like sometime next year, or depending how things work out, maybe late this year, but more likely next year. Next one, this is a suggestion. The attack direction during fights should be updated to always auto aim at the enemy. Agree. Let me make sure that's on my list. Attack direction. Okay, it's not on the list. I'll add it. Make attack auto aim at enemy. Man, typing with one hand is so slow. Okay, it looks like the next question is, there has been talk of a new WoB forum as far back as December, with mention of the new forum will be very soon as far back as February. When can we expect the new forum, and why has building it taken this long? So we hit a snag. We had like the template and everything mostly ready to go, but there was a feature that I really felt was important to have on the forum for it to be even worth using, that's new and requires a significant amount of technical investment. And we basically have gotten a little bit busy with doing technical stuff on the live server. So, and then especially with my hand as well, that's forced it to be delayed. I would like to get the tournament up this year, probably like maybe in summer, depending on how much time I have. I'll try to get that in. But it's a technical challenge that we have to figure out a solution for. Next up, would it be possible to add sending yen and souls for rank 2 and rank 3? I started over completely, deleting both my characters. I was going to send 50 mil to someone to hold for me from my alt, only to be reminded that it wasn't high enough level to send. Yeah, so there's a couple more features a couple more systems, like for tracking and stuff, that I have to put in to make sure that this is not abusable. And once I get those in, then I should be able to do this. Next, what about providing the option for players of the same race to watch your PvPs, and maybe another option for players of the same squad, or a whitelist? This will come in handy for players who are being mentored by someone and want only them to be able to watch them PvP. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Several things are higher on the priority list right now, but we could definitely do that. Next question, when will alt's PvP battles be lower? I'm assuming this is rank requirements, in which case currently there's no PvP required up until 6 to 7. Rank 6 to 7, there's no PvP. That's the first place where PvP is required. You don't need any PvP battles to get up to rank 6. And I think there's a requirement of 50 PvP battles fought. Does not require them to be won, just fought, in order to get to rank 7, which I think is actually important because rank 7 and 8 are sort of the highest, most intense ranks of the game. So I think it's kind of necessary that you participate in some PvP battles to get there. But you can go all the way from rank 1 to rank 6 without any PvP. So I have no immediate plans to lower those. Okay, that's it for the update questions. It looks like we're now onto the game questions. Let's see here. First question. I don't like it when people make Archer bald, call Archer bald, or make jokes. It upsets me for some reason. The trolling on this game has gotten a high bit out of hand, and the joking has gone too far. So we've certainly seen some instances of like hostility in chat, but actually as a whole, I think things have been toning down a bit compared to previous months. If you see instances, please do of course make sure to report them. And then if you, depending on if it's like a single incident like that, or maybe it's something that doesn't seem like it's actually against the rules, but you think maybe it should be, you could take a screenshot of that area, those posts in chat, or submit a support with the like the server time that they happened, and we can take a look at the chat and just tell us, what you think should be added to the rules, and we can look into potentially adding that. Next question. Should feeds give more souls than when one's at max I think this question means should feeds give more souls than hard AI when you have all stats and all moves capped? Because as things stand, feeding for income is a moot point. One hard AI pays 16.6 times more than one feed. Okay, so hard AI are definitely supposed to give more gains than feeds, especially if you're on your 15 daily bonus. They give a lot more. But then after that, the hard AI are definitely supposed to give more. 16 times might be a little bit too high. I'll check into that because that seems a little bit higher than there should be. It was probably due to some changes when we did the AI update. So I'll run some time analysis. But yeah, hard AI are definitely supposed to give more rewards than feeding. Feeding is sort of like the when you don't have time and you just want to get your pools drained and get back to training. Next question. Invasion, DR, and defense boost sucks to fight against, and I'm sure Hollows would complain about it too if they invaded. Is there any plans to change that? Because I barely win fights as is, and during invasions it's almost impossible. Okay, so actually, this is the first time I've gotten a complaint about this that I can recall, even during the periods where people were invading. But just to clarify here, the defense boost in invasions, when the boss is still alive, there's a 30% defense boost, which this is to encourage people to go straight for the boss and take it out. That's why it even has the name Defender Boss, because it defends the people who are nearby. And then after that Defender Boss dies, you get 15%. The defenders get 15% defense boost. And I think this is fairly important to give people a reason to get out of their barracks and fight. Whereas otherwise, it might just be, oh, I'll get a few OP. But it's pretty natural for when you're in somebody's home turf for them to have a home field advantage. That's pretty standard in, most types of competitive things. And I think it would feel pretty bad for any defending race if you get invaded on, because once you've been invaded on, the enemy has already won to an extent. They've already locked you out of Kyoto for like 20 minutes, so you can't train there. You can't do anything there. You can't even do feeds or patrols in your home area. And you can be attacked at any point while you're running around. So this would naturally create a situation where people would just flee into their barracks, which already somewhat happens. The defense boost gives them some sense of, yeah, the enemy is ahead and they're winning, but at least I have something on my side. And there's some reason that I can get out of my barracks and fight. And I think this is important regardless of which race is invading for the other race to have this ability. Now, as for, we talked about this a little bit in chat and you mentioned maybe reducing it, but the thing is, I think even if I reduced it from 15% to 10%, like if you lose the fight, it's still not going to feel any better. And this is not likely to, feel like, oh, okay, this 10% feels a lot better than the 15%. I'm winning a lot more fights now. It seems really, really unlikely that would happen because the difference in damage between 15% defense boost and 10% is pretty small. So to make this really feel better for the invaders, I would have to take it down to the point where it's almost not a factor, which then removes the point of having it. And as I just mentioned before, I think it's important to have to give a sort of giving something for the defenders so that they're not just getting completely rolled over. Next question. Does nerf affect the defense of AoEs, including barriers? Yes, it does. To be specific, it lowers them. So if you nerf someone and they use an AoE, the AoE will have less health and less damage than it otherwise would have. Next question. Current meta is everyone wants to 3-hit. It's causing PvP to be really played out and not exciting for R8. The other issue is the only other meta is the notorious stall tactic. Are there any plans to add more tactics like actually being tanky or spirits being able to nuke without AoE being a requirement to winning so that more people can play with more options? Right. So I definitely do want to increase the minimum duration of a fight. I mentioned the other day, basically I'm looking at targeting maybe 3-hit would be the damage level if you have two very aggressive people against each other. Then it might be 3-hit, but let's say you have an aggressive person against a balanced or defensive, and I'm referring to combat style. So like, melee aggressive versus melee balanced, or melee aggressive versus melee defensive, or something like that. So in that instance, maybe they wouldn't be able to 3-hit. Maybe they'll only be able to 4-hit. So I'm looking at targeting sort of that 3 to 4 hit range as what damage should be, and potentially I might be able to go a little farther than that, depending on just what strategy ends up feeling good. But stalling will definitely be a problem with damage lowering. So the anti-stall mechanics I'm working on, I'm gonna have them in before the tournament. It's pretty much a requirement to get those in. I'm gonna try to get them in by like the first or second week of June, or I guess by the second week of June, so that there's a couple of weeks before the tournament even starts to get them refined, tested fully by the whole player base and refined before we get into the tournament. Um, so also the other thing I wanted to mention here is but the stall mechanic should be reducing the maximum duration. So the battle's not going to be lasting only 3 turns, but it shouldn't be lasting 100 turns either. So we're gonna make it so the tactics that people use for no other purpose than prolonging the battle, those tactics should no longer be as effective once the anti-stall mechanics are in. They may not be perfect at first, but the important thing is I'm going to put in the system and then continue to refine it. And once it gets refined with more data and more battles, seeing how they actually play out in practice, then it should get closer to doing that. And the other thing I wanted to quickly mention here is you said spirits being able to nuke without AoE being a requirement to winning, right? You can actually sort of pull this off depending on your build. Some spirit builds rely heavily on AoE. Others, like Spirit Resid Core, does not rely as heavily on AoE. I've actually fought extensively with Spirit Residual Core, and it does not rely as heavily on AoE. So there are definitely spirit builds that don't have this as a major requirement. It certainly helps a lot for instance, against melee, having like at least one like an ice AoE or something, particularly if you're getting second turn, can really help. Next question. Before the battle update, it seems like it was more balanced because each spec could create movesets that they enjoyed and still be viable. Any thought as to what happened with the changes and how to make every spec feel viable? I honestly feel like for those that were here before the battle update, it's sort of a grass is greener on the other side of the fence kind of thing, and they probably remember fights before the battle system as being a bit more fun than they actually were, because I remember that meta pretty clearly, and it actually ended up still being pigeonholed. Before the battle update, and this is talking about the 2015 update that made battles have two-stage turns and created differences between melee and spirit. So before that update, there were a couple of common tactics. One common tactic was the moving weakness into moving recoil, and that would pretty much just repeat. People would just be moving weakness, moving recoil, moving weakness, moving recoil, and just killing people. And that wasn't actually amazingly interesting. The other tactics were AoEs because you couldn't move and attack at the same time. So if you laid down an AoE, your opponent would then be basically, if they wanted to attack, they were stuck in the AoE. And the third tactic was to have regen cores and go running around the battlefield just healing, which wasn't that interesting either because since you couldn't move and attack, if you have two people on the battlefield here, right, and this one moves over here, if this person moves in, they don't get to attack. And if this person stays here, or if they stay here, they can't hit the person down here. So it created even more stalling issues than we have today, if that's if you can even believe that. But we had a ton of stalling issues. We had to have extensive rules about you can only move so many times and all that. So I don't think the battle system. I agree the battle system was more balanced though. The reason it was more balanced was because melee and spirit were the same. They were mirrored. You had the same moves, the same movement, the same range. The only difference was thematic. You had spirit themed abilities, you had melee themed abilities, but their effects, their range, their power, everything was the same. So it's obviously going to be harder to balance when you separate those two things, but I think it's very important to have those separate to make for more interesting fights than just everybody having exactly the same things. So I expect it will continue to be a challenge to thoroughly ensure melee and spirit are balanced as we make more challenges, but I think it's important that they have those differences, even if it is a struggle. I think it makes things more fun overall in the long run. Next question, are you considering at any point giving the AI battles a dissipate? It's super easy right now to bait out their strongest attacks with barriers. Also, last week you spoke about the tournament. Just curious, will it be around for every single rank or just the important ones? So it's important to note that I want to make probably 3 different tiers of AI. There should be a tier of AI that's fairly straightforward to kill. There should be a tier of AI that uses some basic tactics, but isn't that challenging if you know your way around the battle system well. And then there should be a tier that's harder and maybe it pushes you a little bit to fight, and maybe you have to break out some advanced tactics in order to beat them. The advanced AI I'm probably going to reserve for things like the Kyoto Arena. But for the normal AIs, like the easy, normal, hard AI, they're probably not going to be quite as smart. Hard AI have more options than the others, so hard AI are going to be a little bit trickier. But I'm perfectly okay with something like using a barrier to block an AI's strongest attack, because that teaches players defensive tactics. Like new players coming in, they'll learn that you can use a barrier to stop a combo, and it's useful. But for the hard AI like Kyoto Arena, and also for maybe some bosses, I may consider adding in dissipates and stuff like that. Next, could you please clarify the Zan/Res reroll logic? In a recent update, you mentioned that once Bankai rolls are maxed, they will not drop again unless cores are changed. Is this true? If so, does this logic apply to Shikai rolls? Okay, so when re-rolling, Shikai and Bankai do work the same. The way this works is uh, if you're, I'll use Bankai first because it's a simpler example, right? So if you're re-rolling your Bankai, you have 5x multipliers on everything. If you have never re-rolled before, you have a 33% chance for a max score to change. Okay, now to compare this, if the system didn't do anything, you would have a 50% chance for the core to change, because if you roll 1 and 3 numbers, there's or I guess it would still be 33%, but so you start out with 33% chance for it to change, but with every reroll you do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the chance drops by 3.3%. And it keeps doing that, and if you do the math, you'll figure out that once you get to 10 rerolls done over your entire lifetime on that character in the game, your chance of a max score changing will drop to 0%. So once you hit 10 rerolls, the max score will never change. When you do a core boost change, your Bankai multiplier, like 3x, 4x, 5x, will be preserved, but the Shikai multiplier is not necessarily preserved. The reason I allow this is because a couple of reasons. For one, the difference is fairly small. Like, let's say you have boost core. The difference between minimum and maximum on Shikai, well, when you keep your 5x multiplier, is the difference between like 50 and 55%. So it's not insignificant, but it's certainly not game breaking. You'll still be able to fight competitively with that. And then if you do want to fix it, since there's only 2 possible rolls for Shikai, you can fix it with a single reroll, because the reroll system already um, tries really hard to make sure your roll changes if it's not maxed. So if you have a non-max Shikai roll and you do 1 all boost reroll, it'll make it max. So it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper than before. And even if you don't spend any extra starts, your core is still going to be very, very close to max and fine to be competitive with. Next, what is the minimum and maximum cost for first and second release, use cost, given 390k plus is on scale? Okay, so I don't remember the maximum Shikai cost. I could look it up, but since this is a video format, I don't want to sort of spend too much time on a sidetrack. I can tell you the minimum. If you're rank 8, level 150, then the minimum on a legendary is going to be about 140 in your first release and about 281 in your second release at 390k on scale. The maximum, if you have a 3x roll, it'll probably, your second release is probably going to be somewhere in the 400 range. Yeah, it's probably about right. Next question, on the Shinigami side of things, what purpose do third seats have in the game? Since they still have to do OP but don't get any seat item and they can't set boosts. So there's a couple things third seats can do. For one, they can send out orders. They can also have alerts. They can send alerts so they can inform their squad members of something. They get increased effect of all squad boosts by 1.2x. So like let's say you had regen boost of 20% and melee training boost of 25%. They would get 0.2x extra effect on each of those. So the 20% regen boost would become 24%, and the 25% melee training would become 30%. But one of the other things for this seat is to just provide like a gateway to the higher seats to have more power, so that someone can prove they're able to do OP and whatnot and challenge through the ranks, instead of just anybody being able to challenge for the lieutenant seat, which might flood them with challenges. It sort of provides that entry point and restriction for getting to the higher seats, so that the higher seats don't get completely flooded with challenges from everybody. It would be cool if you could add an invasion summary page, kind of like the world boss tab. This page could show the top damage dealers to the defender boss, fights that happen during invasions, and race points earned from kills and boss. I like that idea. I'm gonna add that right now to my list. I've been thinking about adding more analytics like this. Like for instance, adding a thing that will show you your own personal battle logs. Now these would be somewhat obscured. The actual effects of your opponent's abilities and some of the confidential information would be obscured, so you don't get to see, for instance, more detail about their abilities than what you were actually able to see in the fight. But you'd be able to see the details of your own abilities, you know, which effects you use, how much damage you did, where you two were on the map, where you attacked, and see basically the order of the fight. That way, this allows you to learn from your previous fights a little bit easier because you can step back through the fight and figure out exactly where you went wrong. So I was thinking about adding something like that, and I think adding this kind of thing for um, what happened in invasions would also be pretty cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and add in this photo page. Next question. How hard would it be to record actions during PvP if they aren't already and allow players to rewatch PvP matches by replaying the actions? Okay, so I sort of already just said that I'm planning to do this. Although I will mention that the battle logs are not as detailed as actually watching a live replay of the fight. This is necessary because to actually watch a replay of the fight as if you were still in it requires showing the battlefield, like the position of every AoE square, every rock, all of that, which takes up a massive amount of storage space. So right now the battle logs table is already up to like 500 megabytes. It dwarfs every other table in the database. It's 10 times as large as the rest of the database combined. And that's without storing the battle area. So until I can figure out like an efficient way to sort of compress the data and whatnot, um, I don't really want to blow up the database by adding in the area to that. But so you'd be able to use with this private battle log feature, you'd be able to see something somewhat similar to the logs that we currently have. So it shows you each turn in a little box, and it shows you where you were, where the opponent was, your health, and pools. It probably won't show the opponent's pools, but it will show their health. Um, so you'll be able to see as you go down, and then like what ability you used, what direction it was, the text of the ability, and the damage dealt. It also shows all like residual ticks and whatnot like that. So the trickiest part with it, it's pretty good at showing anything except AoEs. When AoEs are used, it's pretty lackluster at showing exactly where the AoE went and if it clashed because, like I mentioned, there's a restriction on not storing all of the data for every AoE square. But apart from that, it's still fairly useful. Next question. How does soul hunting and Kyoto Underground Arena work? How do you access it? I've played for ages and I've never done it before. So both of these activities are in Kyoto City. So first things first, you have to go to Kyoto City and then they randomly spawn. So the soul hunting spawns about every 20 minutes and it stays active for 4 minutes. So both of these are always going to spawn on a 5-minute tick. That means if you look at the server time, it's going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25, 30, 35, etc. It always spawns at a multiple of 5. So when the soul hunting spawns, you're going to see a message on the travel page above the search area list, and it's going to say souls have been spotted near 7.13. So then what you will do is you'll go to 7.13, you'll see 4 purple squares on the map. You have to go around all of those 4 purple squares. On one of them, you're going to see a button that says go to nearby soul. When you click that, a couple different things could happen. The souls might run away to a different location. You have to go chase them down. Maybe you'll get in a fight. Or you can successfully bury, if you're a Shinigami, or devour the souls. And when you do that, you get rewards. You get money. I believe you get stats. You get a squad or fraction point, which is actually very unique because this is one of the very few ways in the game to earn fraction points without PvPing and without having to be an officer. I think the only other way to do that is being in the medical squad. So yeah, it's pretty unique in that it provides a way for players that aren't that into PvP, or maybe you're just not, you're not up to the top of your rank set, so you're not very competitive in PvP. You can still do soul hunting. You can still contribute to your squad or fraction. And the other unique thing about soul hunting is when you successfully complete it, it also has a chance to drop a custom change token. The AI battles may have a chance to drop one. I don't recall. but they might. You can definitely get custom change tokens from doing this activity. And Kyoto Underground Arena will spawn for 5 minutes at a random time each hour. When it does, it'll tell you on the travel page Kyoto Underground Arena is at, X location. You can go there. It's a yellow square, and you can do the fight. The fight is a fairly hard AI. It should be harder than the hard AI you would face in the arena or desert. And it gives a massive load of stat rewards at the end, as well as money and a chance for a custom token drop. Next question. For non-balanced users, is there any use for their non-spec pool? For instance, spirit energy for melee users or stamina for spirit users. Okay, the primary ways this are used, you use it for your release because your Bankai or Segunda Etapa drains both pools at the same time. So the way this works out, assuming you have close to the lowest use cost at rank 8, so like the 280 I was mentioning, you'll have about 9,500. Let's say you're a spirit user, you'll have about 9,500 spirit energy and about 6,500 stamina. So as you go through the course of the fight, your spirit energy is being consumed both by your release cost and your moves, while your stamina is only being consumed by your use cost. It usually works out that these end up draining about the same rate, so you run out of both close to the same time. The other possible uses for them include feeding or attacking the base in Kyoto. They're used for those things as well. Okay. So I'll go ahead and warn you guys here. The next question is a very long one. So the next question is about some concerns the Shinigami have had, where they're basically stating their claim is that I am biased towards the Hollow, and that I take biased actions relating to balance and the way I address things. And there's a really long question about that. If that's something you want to hear, continue on. If this isn't really relevant to you and you want to skip on to the next section, look for the timestamps for Misc Questions below in the About area. Otherwise, we will get into this. So I'll read this entire question. How come you are so biased towards the Hollow race? Now, I know you are going to say your usual, I'm not biased, I look after both races equally, blah blah. But here we are after another showing that it's not true. Recently you found out defensive items don't work. Shini have been complaining about there being something wrong with damage for a long time, especially damage from several Hollow players, and the only response they got from you was, I'll test it later. Now recently, in the last week, one of the Shini figured out a strong build and racked up a lot of kills, and what happened? The Hollow started complaining that it's too strong and that it's broken, and what it seemed was that as soon as Legs started saying it's broken, bam, you are logging on, ready to check what's broken and try to fix it. Now we all know you were fine to leave it up when it helped Hollow players, just now that Legs and the Hollows are losing, time to nerf. Okay, so I'll go ahead and answer this right away. This isn't the case. What happened with the damage situation was a few weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when. It was probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. There were some reports from players that they were being two-shot. Being two-shot is one of the critical things in the game where I'm just plainly not okay with it. I'm just not okay with people being able to be two-shot. So at the time, this appeared to be a new issue. Like it hadn't been happening before. Damage had been lower before, but somehow it had gone up. At the time, I looked through all the code for the battle system that I'd recently done changes to, and I tried implementing previous versions of the battle code into it, changing things. I couldn't really find any way to replicate the old lowered damage. So instead, what I did was I put in the immediate change of adding the defense boosts, and that was in the 2.6.7 update, which was like, when was this? Um, May 2nd. So I first started addressing this issue 4 weeks ago, almost a month ago. Or I guess that's 3 weeks ago. Okay. Now that did lower damage, and initially I didn't hear about any more two shots. Some people made some general references to two shots, but I can't really do anything with somebody just like saying in chat, "Oh, I got two shot," unless they tell me what battle it happened in. Because if they don't tell me that, if I can't get the battle ID to look at who they fought, what their build was, what pools both of them were at, what effects were used, I can't figure out the circumstances that caused the two shot. So there's nothing I can really do to like test it, replicate it, etc. So finally, around let me find the exact date I saw this support. looking through the supports now. Let's see where I can find it. That's Blink. The first one I can recall, the major one that triggered this was where KageX complained about Caesar because Caesar had basically two-shot him. And the interesting thing here was that with residual core, he was able to hit 8.7k with an unreleased recoil as residual core, or not unreleased, but unboosted recoil as residual core. I saw that. I looked at the log. I was able to verify it and confirm. They were like close to full pulls, no pen moves or other weaknesses have been used. It was just straight up 8.7k, and that's way too much damage for residual core to be doing. Because when you add that up, that's like 11,250 damage or 12,000 damage or something like that if you add up all the ticks. So I knew that was definitely way too much damage. So we've been a little bit delayed on supports with my hand recently, but I got that support early last week. I think I got it about the 14th or the 15th. And so I started looking into it. Although originally I had to do tests because I wasn't sure yet. People had been saying some generic things about damage is pretty high, but I didn't have enough data to clearly show whether it was specifically residual core or whether it was still damage in general. So I started doing some tests comparing residual core, boost residual core versus berserk residual core, and then I noticed something very interesting, which was that the residual damage was fluctuating. So I would use the residual for my residual core, right? It would do 1100 damage on my opponent's turn, and then it would do 1300 damage on my turn to them. So that sort of triggered in my mind that the defense was somehow fluctuating between when it was my turn and their turn, which shouldn't be happening. It should be the same. So I looked into that and I checked was it the defensive stats? Was it the defense boost? It wasn't that. Those things were staying the same. And eventually I managed to track down that it was the resistance. Resistance was lower. It was only 65% on my turn, but it was 90% on their turn, which ended up being because what happens is when it was your opponent's turn, or when it was like your turn, right? Your opponent's items were not being loaded, which means when you hit them, their items were not applying, which obviously meant that their defensive items had basically no effect because they weren't applying. So when I saw that bug, that's a pretty major bug, and this was causing multiple two-shots. I tested some other builds that were also able to two-shot as well. And so since that was a pretty major and serious bug, I hotfixed that right away. Now, it's very important to mention, the claim here is that that somehow I delayed this while it was benefiting the hollow, but then when it started benefiting the Shini, I fixed it. That's not the case at all. I fixed it as soon as I got a root cause on it, but I have been a little bit delayed on working things because of my hands. I can't test things the same way. I had to get my roommate to come in here and help me do some of the battles and test the numbers. And this bug also does not affect any race specifically. This bug literally affects everybody. Everybody wears resist items. So this bug affects everybody's damage. It doesn't affect it affects all cores. Pen, Resid, Berserk, Weakness, Boost. It affects Melee Spec, Spirit Spec, Balance Spec. It affects everybody. So this isn't even a change. This isn't any kind of there's no kind of bias that could even be involved with this change. Because the primary complaints I received about it were from Caesar as well. I think I got one battle log about Mikaru, who was the other person mentioned to this, but there were people from both sides that had really high damage because of this. So there was no bias involved in any of this, and it wouldn't even make sense as a bias change. I could see how this could be misconstrued as a bias change if I had changed to some specific core boost. There might be an argument, but this isn't even about that. This is just general damage to everybody. So I don't really see how that seems that way. Now the next thing is this kind of thing has been going on for a long time. I know you don't really care, but you are losing a lot of Shini players due to the biased actions you consistently take. You take whatever Shini say and disregard it as some sort of idiotic complaining. Yet throughout history of the game, the Hollows are always the race that finds bugs and abuses them as much as they can. If a Shini finds a bug that makes it build strong, you nerf it within a week. But if a Hollow does, we have to send complaint after complaint for months for nothing to even happen. Will you ever become someone who is unbiased, or will Shini have to deal with being the second-rate race in your eyes? So, I do care about losing players. Just for starters, I do care. This game is This game is both my passion and my livelihood. So I want as many players as possible. I want to increase the player base of WoW. And I know sometimes my actions, the decisions I make, the changes I make, they're not always the most popular, and sometimes they probably do seem unfair, regardless of what the intent behind them was. Sometimes I'm not a perfect person. I'm a human being. I can promise you that I have no intent to make any of these changes biased towards a certain race. The only thing I want to do is make WoW competitive. I just want to make both races able to compete against each other, to have fun fights, to be able to, compete on bosses, compete in invasions. I want to make other stuff that doesn't even involve races competing against each other. I just want this game to have a lot of fun action in it. I just want people to be able to team up with their friends, go out, fight some stuff. And what happened? The unfortunate reality of this game is that due to the way the competition is set up, it can happen that one race gets ahead. And by ahead, like that race, for instance, might have more active players, or their active players might be have better builds in the current meta or something. Although usually better builds doesn't last for very long because after a couple weeks, people have seen what they're doing and they'll either switch to it or adapt a counter to it. Usually depends on the build. But where was I? Oh yeah. So with these builds in the game and everything, and the players like this and competing, when I make a change, I don't have the full perspective of both sides because I I don't play the game competitively. I PvP, I spar people, but I don't participate in invasions or bosses, and I do this to avoid becoming subconsciously biased towards either race. Because like, let's say that I was competing in the boss on the Hollow side or on the Shinigami side. It's sort of natural when you're competing in something against another team to become attached to whichever side that you're competing for. So to avoid that, I don't compete. The problem with that is it makes me not have some of the perspective that you as players have of being on your side and knowing exactly what it's like to compete against the other race. The feelings that come along with the wins and the losses and the struggles. Those feelings. I don't have all of those feelings because I'm not in the competition. So this is why sometimes when I make changes, I'll float the change out there in chat and say, "Hey, I'm looking to possibly do this." And they'll get feedback on it. And sometimes based on that feedback, I'll scrap a change entirely because, it turns out it's really players are really, really concerned about it and just don't, and it seems like a bad idea, or maybe I'll alter one and make it a little bit less severe. So the other thing I want to stress here is that I'm open to your concerns. If you think a change I'm making seems biased, please do tell me. If you've already mentioned an issue in supports and you feel like it's being ignored, you can send me a PM or you can send something to this Ellison's Corner because I really do want to know about this. I want to make the game fun for everybody. It's not in anybody's best interest, including mine, to make the game cater towards one side. The changes that the catch up mechanics and the things like in invasions, the losing side, the side that's getting invaded on gets extra defense buff. This is just to make the game more competitive. This is a standard thing in all competitive games. If you look at even like MOBAs, for instance. Now, a MOBA is somewhat of a poor example because the game only takes 45 minutes, but you can sort of think of an invasion in that same time frame when an invasion is something that only takes about 20 minutes, right? So in a MOBA game, what happens is when you start pushing into your enemy's base, they get towers closer together, they get faster respawn times. Depending on the MOBA, there's other things on the map that give them advantages. So it's a very natural thing when you get the advantage and you start pushing in, the enemy gets a little bit more. The enemy gets a little bit of help to make it so they don't just get rolled over. So they have a chance to fight back. And I know sometimes these things might seem unfair, but I'm just trying to make the game competitive. And if you feel pretty strongly about these, again, feel free. Tell me. I can see if there's some way to work it out. The other thing that I'll answer here, um, about the time for issues to be resolved. Uh, it's really hard right now because my response time on issues, my time to actually get them resolved, is slower because I can't work. And I know this is frustrating for you guys, and believe me, it's probably more frustrating for me than it is for you guys. I have to sit here all day, and I could type if I wanted to, but I have to sit here with the knowledge that if I spend even a few hours typing and doing work, that's probably going to add 5 to 6 days to my recovery. It's going to be 5 to 6 more days, which is like 100 hours. It's 100 more hours that I can't be working just for working a few hours. It's incredibly frustrating. There's so many things I want to do to WoB. I want to get this event in. I want to get tournament ready. I want to make a lot of cool features. I want to get the next round of staff applications, not just for moderators, but I want to get the content team applications open. There's so many things I want to do, but I can't do it because it's going to hurt WoB in the long run if I put in the work now and injure my hands more and it takes me longer to recover. I'm trying to do everything I can. I'm dictating some things with voice. I did staff apps. I did notes for Hitori to review on the staff apps via voice. Um, like I said, I get on Skype with Hitori to help him with supports. I'm trying to do what I can, but I can't do as much work as I want to. I can't do the work that's going to get these things resolved really quickly, or else in the long run, it's going to result in a longer period of time where I'm not able to do anything. So I'm sorry that it's taking a long time right now. Um, I really appreciate those that have been patient and have understood and hung in there and things like that. And I promise you, when I get back to having my hands up to full speed, I'm gonna put in so much work on WoB you are not going to believe it. Before this started, I was working up to putting in, probably 12 hours a day. I was working towards getting there. And obviously, I have to be a little bit careful to avoid re-injury in the future. But I'm gonna try to put in as much work as I can towards making this game really great. I had a realization this year that I haven't necessarily been trying to make WoB great. I've only been trying to make it better. Which those two things, being making it better and making it great, might seem like a subtle difference, but there's sort of a difference in the mindset. And I realize I really need to be focused on making WoP great, not just making it better. So you guys deserve that, and especially all of those that have supported me all these years. And I'm going to work really, really hard on doing that. I just have to get my hands better first. And if you feel that I'm being biased, if you feel I'm not answering your concerns, you can tell me in my PM box. I'm also happy to set up a Discord session. It's probably easier right now so that I don't have to try to do awkward speech to text or typing with my left hand. We can go into the Discord. You guys can all type questions in chat and I can answer via voice. I'm happy to set those up. Just let me know. Like, say, hey, LSM, we're looking for a Discord time. We were thinking maybe in 8 p.m. on Monday, server time. Does that work for you? And I'll be like, yeah, okay, sure. I'll be there. And you can, voice any complaints. I'll answer any questions or whatever. Okay. I think that's about it for the game questions. Looks like we're into the miscellaneous questions section. First question, do you feel the Avatar universe could have been expanded even further and many seasons would have been made of different avatars and their own unique storylines separate from their predecessor, like Doctor Who style? I feel this is a bit of a struggle. Avatar, compared to other series, sort of has more intricate storylines with more characters and also really epic scale things going on. I think there's only so many times you can do the 100 Years War storyline, and there's only so many times you can do the Dark Avatar storyline. You know, these are some like really big unprecedented things. You can only show the first Avatar, only show his origin story once, and the whole modernization thing isn't going to be as cool. So there's sort of these really big macro things that they played around that they can't necessarily. There's a finite number of them. Maybe they can figure out more than I can. I mean, I'm sure they can, but I think the number of Avatar series you could make that would feel just as good and as epic and be able to have multiple characters interacting and developing with a fairly cohesive plot over multiple seasons is pretty difficult. So I think if they just tried to like show, oh, let's show Avatar Kyoshi's story and let's show so and so story, I think the quality and the enjoyment of those shows would not be as good as like Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. I think it wouldn't quite be up to that level, and I'd actually be kind of sad to see the series do that. Next question: who is your favorite villain out of Legend of Korra, and whose ideologies do you think you can relate to the most? My favorite villain was definitely Zahir. He pulled things out that nobody's seen before. He showed a completely new side to airbending, like pulling the air out of the Earth Queen's lungs and um, gaining the power of light was really interesting because it goes against you always think of airbenders as being these peaceful monks, but while he took a lot of inspiration from those monks, he was completely different in his he was like violent with it. So it was kind of weird, but he was a really interesting villain. He had a pretty good point about the Earth Queen not treating her subjects well, and monarchy sort of being archaic and needing to be put down. He was way too extreme about his methods, but he had a pretty good point, and he made for a pretty compelling villain who I thought had some legitimate terror and was a interesting enough character. And then for whose ideologies I think I can relate to the most, probably Kuvira. She was probably actually the most relatable out of any of them, just because like she even started as a normal person. She just had to go through the Earth Kingdom, her homeland falling into chaos, and she wanted to restore order. That just it pushed her a bit too far. She snapped a little bit and forgot about order being all about helping people and started justifying the means with the ends, locking people up, putting them in prison camps, forced labor. She sort of um, disillusioned herself into thinking that that was somehow helping the greater good. But apart from that, I can sort of relate to the chaos and organizing and bringing order. I'm big into organization. I'm not big into forced labor though. Just to be clear on that point. Next question. LSM, after all that's happened, can we still expect to see LOE? And if so, will there be more than just WoB and LOE? I honestly would like a Sword Art Online one or even Star Wars. There would definitely be LOE. Definitely. I still think about plans in my head for LOE, although my focus is still on WoB for right now. I'm probably going to start. Uh, it's going to be a little bit tricky because when I start working again, I'm going to have to slowly ramp up, probably starting with an hour a day and then 2 and then 3, as my hands slowly work up to the strength of being able to handle it. But I'm definitely going to be working on both when I can. But Legend of the Elements, though, this is going to be quite a different game than WoB. I've mentioned this, but it's far from just being like WoB with an avatar theme thrown on it. This is a completely different game on many levels, and it's going to take a lot of work. So it may even take like 3-4 years. I'd like to get it out sooner than that. It sort of depends on, I have to finish building sort of all these prototypes, and then I have to recruit more people. And depending on how many people I'm able to recruit after I show them sort of the rough prototype of the game, that's sort of going to determine how them and, depending on whether I get extra funding or not, that'll determine whether the rest of the game takes, 1 to 2 years past that point or like 3 years past that point or whatnot. So, yeah. As far as more than just that, I have a couple rough ideas in my head, but they're sort of too far away. I don't like planning farther than 5 years. Um, Sword Art Online and Star Wars are definitely not in the cards. For Sword Art Online, I think if you look at the game itself wasn't that interesting outside of it being VR. Like it being complete VR was the main thing that made it interesting. And apart from story and whatnot, but the game mechanics itself weren't like that super special or anything. They were pretty similar to a lot of MMOs. If anything, Log Horizon had more interesting systems, so I could like maybe make a Log Horizon game. But I sort of want to try more original content after I go to LOE. Try making something on my own instead of just doing it from a source derived or deriving it from another source. And then Star Wars especially. Star Wars is really hard to make a game unless you have a license because just with the way the Star Wars universe is, with all the unique races and stuff, if you use them, you're breaching Disney's intellectual property, and they will come after you with a fleet of lawyers. So it's already happened to Star Wars fan games; they got shut down. So it's not really realistic for me to even want to make a Star Wars game unless I was in the position of being able to get a license. And they're really picky, so there's not a good chance that they would give me a license. So next question: if you had a choice between living without a foot or a hand, which one would you choose to keep? I'd live without a foot, definitely. Yeah, it would suck for walking around. It would really suck. But let's be honest, a lot of my life revolves around using a computer, for better or worse. That's just the way it is. And if I didn't have a hand, using a computer would become infinitely more difficult. Because you can sort of get around even with like a prosthetic foot, but it's not that possible to type with a prosthetic hand. It would be my typing speed would probably be forever crippled. So that may sound bad, but like that's just the reality of my life right now. And it's fine. It's cool. Next question. What is your favorite body part? Favorite body part? Like favorite one of mine? I don't know. I kind of like my beard. Does that count as a body part? Maybe this question is referring to like what body part do I find the most attractive, like on a woman? In which case, mm, there's a few. Um, I don't want to get too detailed on this question. Hair probably does not count as a body part, but certain hairstyles I find really attractive, and I'm not gonna say which ones. There's also the classic question of like boobs or butt, to which case I answer porque no los dos. So yeah, that's about as far as I want to elaborate on that. Next question: what sort of music do you listen to? I guess primarily I listen to some hip hop, I listen to some K-pop, I listen to some baby metal. Baby metal is actually not bad, and other sort of rock metal. I usually will go through phases where I'll listen to like one phase I'll be listening to a lot of rock metal, another phase I'll listen to a lot of electro or dubstep. Then I sort of get tired of that. I move on to like K-pop and maybe J-pop, and I move on to I also like opera. Opera's another one. I like working on opera when I've had a lot of caffeine and I'm like really pumped up, and then I'm working on like an epic project or working on a lot of code. I like listening to opera when I do that, particularly like dynamic opera. Like Puccini is probably one of my favorite opera composers. If you just look up a whole album like Best of Puccini, you'll probably get a decent idea of the sort of style of opera I like. Next question: Flat Earth theory. Elaborate on it. Okay, so this one's pretty simple. Back in the days when we didn't have a lot of scientific instruments and satellites in space and everything, right? People would look out at the world and they'd look as far as they could see and it would look flat because the Earth is really, really big, and compared to it, we are really, really small. So it's like if you have, I don't know, let me see if I can find a decent prop. If you have like this water bottle, right? We can clearly see that this is curved, but if you're like the size of a pin on the top of it, you're not gonna be able to see that it's curved. Like it's if you're like really really small on the top of it, it's basically gonna appear because you're only gonna see like from here to here, and you're not really gonna see that it's curved. So that was sort of the case with early humans. We're so small compared to the curvature of the Earth that the normal distance you can see is not enough to perceive it. Then people started looking like they'd go up on a mountain or a hill or look really far. They'd sort of see the horizon looks a little bit curved. And then especially when people sailed around the world. And when they sail around the world, you obviously know you sailed around the world and you never sort of flipped over the bottom. So the world sort of has to be round. And that just got confirmed when we went up into space and looked around. So, yeah. Last question. Have you seen Gintama? And have you heard the word, the bird, the word? No. No and no, unfortunately. Yeah. Looks like that wraps it up for this week. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.